Hydrological Institute. We're situated in Norrköping, which is 2 hours south of here.
My name is Alicia Fagerving. I am a developer. I work at Wikimedia Sweden. And the reason why we are here today is because earlier this year we collaborated in order to upload some data about coastal water bodies in Sweden to Wikidata. I took care of the technical part, and this is what I will be focusing on, while Josefina will focus on the environmental and scientific aspect of the whole endeavor. So this is what I've been thinking we will be doing in this session. We will start hopefully with some very brief introductions, because we are really eager to hear about why you are here and why you're interested in this session. Then I will give a little of a technical background of the sort of work I did with the environmental data about coastal water bodies. Then Josefina will go a bit more in depth into the scientific aspect of the endeavor. But what we really would like to do for us is to be able to discuss and reflect upon some questions and problems and challenges that we came across when working on the data. And that's something we will appreciate your help with. So, why are you all here right now? Who wants to start? Yes?
We care and we are interested.
Why? What aspect are you interested in?
The world changing in an unpredictable and devastating way.
That is true.
I see some nods in the audience.
Yeah? Yes?
I'm interested in this notability criteria. Like, water is something that is everywhere and is so omnipresent, and Wikidata is not supposed to get in everything into it. So how does notability for water count into Wikidata? I found that interesting.
Yes, this is really interesting. Your point about notability and is coastal water notable?
Yeah.
And is it
in what extent is it, like, how detailed is it notable?
Okay, thank you. Yeah, good, interesting idea. Anything else? Yeah?
I'm a civil engineer and a long-term Wikimedian, so I want to see how other people in the same field are contributing their expertise to Wikimedia projects.
Okay, so pretty experienced Wikimedian, interested in how data can be used on Wikidata and what projects are out there. Good. I'm just repeating stuff if people on the live stream are listening too and can't hear the audience. Great, yeah.
I'm interested in how Wikidata can support civic data, and how we might organize ourselves internationally to connect that type of data between countries.
All right, you're interested in. Great, you're interested in how nations can connect and share data through Wikidata. Good, interesting, yeah.
Yes?
Yeah?
I take the ferry to my work every day, and then I just by the harbor and look out at the sea. Sometimes there are some dolphins and sometimes some seals, but also as I live there, I know that some of these sea animals, they are dying because of plastic and so in my neighborhood. So I think this is more important than we really think, because we are right now destroying our how we can live from the sea.
Yes. Thank you. Mm-hmm.
We have one more, which is more directly relevant to ocean currents and data. So I live in Cape Town in South Africa, and Cape Town controversially dumps all of its raw sewage directly into the ocean. And we also got a lot of beaches, and a lot of the currents obviously wash it all around the coast, onto the beaches, out to sea, big fisheries. So currents, pollution, or big things that affect me directly.
All right. So 2 people here who see effects of pollution or are worried about pollution in their oceans. Want to hear more about that? Yeah. Good.
And yeah, that will be something we will go in depth, a little more in depth, to see how we can learn about environmental status of coastal water bodies from Wikidata. So what did we actually do within this project? Our goal was, in general, to make environmental information about Sweden's over 600 coastal water bodies more available to the general public. And is there a better source to learn about stuff than the Wikimedia projects? We have actually collaborated with SMHI earlier on. We had a similar project about lakes. So this is not the first time we are engaging in this sort of work. And we created over 600 new items on Wikidata representing Sweden's coastal water bodies.
Is it possible to ask questions?
It is always possible to ask questions.
Okay, I'd like to know how would you define coastal water body?
I can get into that a bit when I talk
Yes.
about the Water Framework Directive
Fine.
and the more scientific part of
Yeah,
it.
okay.
Yeah, you are definitely not the only person wondering. To be perfectly honest, I'm still not really sure about what a coastal water body is. What was very important to us is to remember that the Wikimedia projects are community-driven, and an institution, even if it's a government agency, does not have any more rights to edit the Wikimedia project than anyone else. And that's why it was very important for us to document the work that we are doing on Swedish Wikipedia and invite the volunteers to discuss with us and give us their points of view, because they are the experts on how things are supposed to be done the Wikimedia way. And in order to bring this information even closer to the general public, as you said, not everyone knows what a coastal water body is or how water management works in Sweden. So we worked on writing articles on Swedish Wikipedia presenting those basic concepts. Furthermore, after the data was imported to Wikidata, we wanted to make it as easy as possible for other people to see and access. That's why we built an infobox template for Swedish Wikipedia that grabs the data from Wikidata and presents it in Wikipedia articles. What was really interesting is that as we understand it, one body of water that has a Wikipedia article can consist of several administrative coastal water bodies. So that infobox reflected that, as it can include information about several coastal water bodies that together form this large water body. Coordinating and actually doing that sort of work gave us a couple challenges, because we at Wikimedia Sweden are experts on the Wikimedia projects, but we don't really know a lot about coastal water body management. And when you do this sort of work, there is always the risk of errors. There is the risk of spending too much time on learning about this sort of stuff and all the background information. And that's why we divided the work between us and SMHI's in-house developer, who had this detailed knowledge and familiarity with the raw data, which was necessary in order to perform the work. So we provided training and information about Wikidata, about the Wikimedia projects, and about the tools and processes and structures that were necessary for them to convert that data into a Wikidata model and upload it to Wikidata. what we discovered during that process is that while the tools that were available, like the Wikidata query service and quick statements that was used to actually upload the data to Wikidata, while those tools were very useful, the documentation for them proved to be very unsatisfactory, and most of the actual knowledge transfer happened through personal contact and asking questions when things and questions came up. And this made us reflect upon how can we make the documentation for those tools better for people who are familiar with data, who know what they would like to do, but who just need those wiki tools to make that dream possible. And well, this is the result of our work. All the 653, I think, coastal water bodies around Sweden, and they are color-coded by their environmental status. And can you, Josefina, explain what the colors mean?
Yes, I can. As you see, we have a legend up in the corner. This shows the status classifications of the Water Framework Directive. All of this data that we've used is generated from actually a certain legislation from the European Union. This legislation builds on that all countries in the European Union have to classify their waters to keep track of the ecological status and the possibilities for the ecosystems to thrive, basically. Yes, so as you can see, about half of our coastal water bodies in Sweden have a good or high status, which is good. They're mostly located at the northern, northeastern coast of Sweden. For the south, we can see that most water bodies have a moderate or worse classification. And this line between the good and the moderate status class is very important, because the Water Framework Directive states that if a water body is moderate or worse, we have to take certain actions to better the quality. And this picture of half of the water bodies having a good or high status and half of them having a worse status than moderate or moderate, it's pretty much what it looks like in Europe in general. So there's a lot of work we can do on Wikidata, and there's a lot of work we can do on our actual coastal water bodies. Question?
What defines bad or high water status?
Yeah, so we have a range of different parameters that we measure to come up to a final status class for a water body. So we have to measure nutrients, fish population.
What was the first?
Nutrients.
Nutrients. Yeah, so the question, just to repeat to those on live stream, what defines these classes, basically. So we have to measure nutrients, sometimes fish population. We have to look at sedimentation. What does the turnover of the water look like? So how fast does the water exchange with different basins on the coast? We have to look at oxygen. How much oxygen is there? Is there hypoxia? So is there depletion of oxygen anywhere? All of these things have to have their own classification, and then we combine those into one last status. So each parameter has its own reference values. So if the nutrients are too high, they're going to come into another slot and maybe turn out to be a moderate status. Then that is used to kind of single out one classification at the top. So there's a lot of different things we have to look at. Yeah.
Do you measure the plastic amount in the seawater?
Not that I know of. I should say I'm not an expert in all of the different parameters. They're on a much more fine-grained level that I'm working on in my job. But I can't recall that I've heard anything about plastic. There could be something about it. I'm not sure, unfortunately. All right, so we should move on, I think.
Yeah, water quality management in Europe.
Yes. So what we see here are the catchment areas of the European Union's countries, as well as Norway and Switzerland, who are not part of the European Union, but they decided to tag along on this in this type of classification anyway. Yes, so this generates a lot of data, and all of it is collected by the counties in Sweden, and for each country, all of the data is collected in the European Environment Agency's data portal. The data is collected under each country's water districts and formulated in structured files, structured XML files. And this fact is very important because it means that we can make bash scripts and routines that read these structured files very easily. Then we have translated that information into code that quick statements can read. Yes, and one more important point in this is that the water management is actually a cycle, and this cycle is 6 years long. That's because we do classification for a while. We monitor what the status is in our waters. Based on that, we do a management plan and decide where to put in actions and where to put in efforts to better the status of some water bodies. These actions have to be made, and we have to monitor the status again. So it's going to be 6 years between each reporting of the status classification. And this poses some problems when we work with the data.
Thank you. How about you explain very quickly what a coastal water body is?
Yes, that was the point, yes. Good. So the Water Framework Directive is very specific in how we divide our water bodies. There's one type of water body that we call a surface water body. That's lakes and coastal water bodies. We have groundwater bodies, and some countries also have a transitional water body. So there's different types of water bodies. The coastal water bodies, they are defined between the baseline of a country, which is, at least for Sweden, the line where we have the lowest point of the sea level, so like a low tide sea level, and then 1 nautical mile outside of that. So we have the baseline, the coast here, the baseline, and then 1 nautical mile out. So all of that water have to be classified into coastal water bodies. And that's...
And north and south?
Yes, so then we have the boundaries for the catchment areas or the water districts that also decide where to draw the line.
Yeah, and to illustrate your point, I brought up an example item that we worked with, Inre Kungsbackafjordens kustvattenförekomst. That is one of the coastal water bodies in a fjord in western Sweden, where you can see things such as how polluted it is and what sort of ecological and chemical status it has. In this case, it's a poor one.
Yes, and the chemical status is a bit special. Also, it doesn't have 5 classes; it just has 2 classes. So it's either a good or a. It doesn't have the same names as the classes, but it's either good or it doesn't reach good status.
Well, it's either
it's only
good
2
or
classes,
bad.
good or bad, basically. Yeah.
And here you can see we have added external identifiers in order to connect this data with external databases.
Yes, a very important identifier here is the EUCD number. This is used to identify the water bodies in all of Europe.
And here you can go directly to the AONET database and learn more about this coastal water body. Yes?
So I wonder, when you have two water bodies adjacent to each other, you may have a continuous gradient of, let's say, mercury among these. It's not like the border is not clean on one and that not clean on the other one. How do you deal with it from like a Wikipedia point of view or a measurement point of view, saying that there is a shift? Okay, so let's say 90% of the water is this one good, but 10 is really bad, as bad as the one in between. Is that reflected anywhere?
Yes, this is very interesting. So the question is, how do you handle gradients in some parameters that we measure and that we classify in the water bodies? Obviously, it's not going to be completely homogeneous in one water body. And this isn't actually something that Wikidata has to trouble itself with. This is something that the water management in each country has to manage. And they do it by having a lot of knowledge of the actual area and changing how water bodies are divided between cycles, actually. So a water body can exist for a couple of cycles and then disappear, because we've seen that the levels are the same in this water body as in this one, so we can just as well put them together. And it's a sign of that the processes are the same in the two, so we can might as well clump them together. On the other hand, between cycles we can see that this is more troubled by a certain type of chemical now, so we should divide them. But of course there are a lot of different parameters, and you can't just make a division based on one of them. So it's a very complex process. But that's generally how we have to handle it. Between cycles, evaluate the division. Is it still correct? Can we still see them as separate or merged water bodies?
So within one coastal water body, you're always having several measuring points for the water quality in order to make that decision. Okay, now it is about time to separate these bodies, because the water quality, maybe due to a little river coming out, there is changing in comparison to the rest of the former unified water body, and then so you always have several measure points. And do you have like a fixed square saying, okay, we have so and so many measure points on so and so many square kilometers?
Ideally, so the question is, do you always have measurements in each water body?
Well, I assume you need to have severals in order to be able to separate bodies again.
Yes, ideal. So the question is about, do we actually have measurements in all of the water bodies to make that decision and divide them? So ideally, there is measurements to do these kinds of decisions. We don't personally make those decisions ourselves at the Swedish Meteorological and Hydrological Institute, SMHI Institute. There is a communication between the counties and SMHI around this. But many times, just regarding measurements, the amount of measurements is actually very scarce in some water bodies. So in some cases, we can use, or the water management uses, modeled data as well. And that's something that we do in our institution. We model the water quality. That's actually my main job, to model the water quality, and that's why I'm a bit involved in this. So I don't know exactly all of the details in the decision process for dividing and merging coastal water bodies, but these are generally the types of things I believe they look at when they, and then we at SMHI we help with the data around dividing the actual areas, but the decision comes somewhere else.
Thank you. Actually, your question about gradients within coastal water bodies brings me to my next point, that is, Wikidata is not about truth. Wikidata has nothing to do with truth. It's all about what's there in the sources.
Yes.
So that's not our job to judge that. And because of that, Wikidata is not always easy to work with, and we encountered several challenges in our work that we had to solve in some way. A very big issue that caused quite a bit of response from the Swedish Wikimedia community was whether we should create brand new Wikidata items for every coastal water body, or whether we should assume that, well, an item like the Kungsbacka Fjord is the same as the administrative-ish coastal water body called the Kungsbacka Fjord. This caused quite a bit of discussion in our community.
How did it end?
Well, after a bit of trouble with some items being merged and then split up, we came to the conclusion that yes, we keep them separate. We kind of drew a parallel to things like nature reserves. You can have an island that is fully covered by a nature reserve, but on Wikidata they should be modeled in a completely different way, because, for example, a nature reserve has an inception date, which the island or the forest doesn't do.
The Black Forest and the Black Forest National Park are two things.
Exactly.
Yes, exactly. And one is a more administrative unit entity, you can say, the park, and one is a more geographical entity, the actual island or lake or whatever.
But you did read.
So this is one of the most interesting questions, I believe, in this work. So there is a separation, but how do we still show the link? Because there is an unquestionable link between the two.
There is the Wikidata property must not be confused with or something.
Yes, we did. We actually did. Must not be confused with, which is what we used in the first place before some users came and merged them.
I like that property.
Yeah, exactly. So, yes.
That's actually an incorrect use of must not be confused with, because those are ostensibly different ways of classifying the same geographical area. I think what you should be using is partially overlaps with, or even subclass of,
Partial.
or located.
Yeah.
Partial overlaps with is probably the best one to use. If the administrative governmental area is exactly the same area as the Water Institute's definition of that coastal water body, then they should probably be the same item. If they occupy different areas but there's a substantial overlap, then you should use partial overlaps with, and maybe also use located in the administrative entity of.
Yeah. Okay. So I feel that we have a lot of material to workshop on right now.
That we don't have time for, because
we do have some time.
Right, yeah. Because when did we start?
A 1:45, and we have to end in about 12 minutes. But I have a suggestion, because this is what we want to get to now. We want to get your opinions and thoughts on this, and this is obviously a question that we have opinions on. So how about you pick your favorite way of solving this problem? I hope we've explained the issue. I'd like to see your favorite way of solving it, and about 3 arguments for, and if you can find any arguments against using that way of solving it. Would that be something to do? Maybe divide yourself into groups. Should we do groups?
If it works for you, because this is kind of awkward in this room.
Yeah, it is. So you will have to move around a bit, yeah.
Have you got much more material to teach us after this slide?
No.
This is actually...
This is the last discussion.
Yeah.
So
I love that.
Before that, I have a question concerning lack of data. Because in the beginning you talked about European data sources feeding into this. And with radioactivity spreading over Europe in all countries apart from France. France is the country where you have the most nuclear power plants. So you could see on the map that until Germany and until the French border was lots of radioactivity, and then when you came to Spain, you also saw some radioactivity, but France was white. But you could probably assume that there was radioactivity in France, but they didn't want to report it because of all of this. So how do you deal then when if you have that kind of data and you have your gradients and these data are lacking? Are you adding that to it to Wikidata and saying we are assuming that this is also there in your case or in the water bodies, or if you don't get this information? Or are you saying that no, there's zero mercury around France? It's everywhere else, but not in France.
Okay, I see your question. So how do we handle lack of data?
And are you putting it there because you actually know that it will be there? It's just that they haven't shown it is there for one reason or
Yeah. So there are some cases where there haven't been possibilities to measure some of the parameters for one reason or another. Those reasons don't show up in the structured files, so that's not something we can, with this technique, map on Wikidata. And hopefully, the complementary information that we put in the articles and describe the water management in Wikipedia articles will help with this understanding.
But right now it doesn't say missing data, or
No.
a zero is a zero. That's what you're saying. But and it could indicate that there is no mercury.
Yeah, so it doesn't say mercury 0. It just
No
mercury
value.
is just not there.
Just not in there.
Yeah.
Yeah, because in Wikidata you can use no value as a value to to indicate that you've actually looked that up and it's not there, as opposed to simply forgetting to add it to Wikidata. But in the data that you provide, that the point of the data is that the data is there, right?
Yeah.
It's,
Can I also ask a question?
of course.
Where, how much of the data that you moved to Wikidata was input by hand, and how much of it was imported by bots that you created for this purpose?
I actually never got to see the source data.
Yeah.
So
Everything is imported by transforming the data with a bash script, transforming the structure file with a bash script, forming it into a quick statements code, and then putting it into quick statements. So it's I would say it's automatic.
Yes.
Everything
yes.
is automatic. Yeah.
Yes, but for example, things like when we used should not be confused with, that had to be done manually in order to find the Wikidata items with similar names that indicate the sort of water body that it could be confused with.
Yeah, we haven't had any systematic work of those things, not to confuse with. Right, maybe we should just continue with questions and skip the workshop.
Yeah.
Do you have more questions? I love this, that you have questions. It's awesome.
Because one of the big challenges that we have listed here, that we've had in mind all the time, is how can this data be used now that it's on Wikidata? Yes?
Well, what about the maintenance of the data? I mean, you have now this collaboration process, and it probably bound some resources in your institute and within Wikimedia Sweden as well. And I mean, we all know data is changing over time, and probably in 6 years there's some new data coming. How did you, or could you ensure sustainable that there will be a constant flow of data coming into those new items, or how do you go around with it? Or will you just say, well, in 6 years, please come to our database and pick the data and harvest the data, and that's it. So how do you
So the question is, how do we make sure that data is updated?
Yeah.
And as I talked about, this 6-year cycle.
Yeah, we do not have a process in place, but we have been talking about it a lot, and we do remember that the next cycle comes and new data will come. And we still haven't come to a satisfactory conclusion for how this will be solved. We will burn that bridge when we get to it. Yes?
Just to comment on that, working at SMHI, we have tried our very best to include this type of information in the report that we've written. So we're 3 people on SMHI that have worked with the data and moving things to Wikidata, and we've all tried to describe our methods as clearly as possible, and this will be left over to the manager of our group, and hopefully we can turn this into a cycle rather than just the project that will die after all. But it all depends on.
It might become a routine of your job to actualize the data within Wikidata.
I certainly hope it could be a routine, actually.
Yeah. Just a quick word, if you do go to the page of this session in the Wikimedia program, there is a link to the report that was published very recently about this very thing. Yes, I think you were first.
Yeah. So you said that the data comes from this European Environment Agency data portal. Is the data standardized from country to country?
Yes, it is, and these are the structured XML format files.
Okay.
So hopefully they're going to look the same from year to year. That's the idea. But then again, things do change. But otherwise, there's no purpose with the structured files if they're going to change them.
Is it the same reporting cycle, the 6-year cycle in every
Yes,
country?
same for all countries.
So can you share the bash script so that we can do other countries with the
Yes,
bash script?
I just talked to my developer at SMHI, and he's positive to cleaning up his scripts and absolutely putting them on some sort of GitHub place. So, and that will be published on the project site.
A small follow-up. You say you discussed this with the community. Was that the English language?
Swedish. We worked entirely with the Swedish Wikipedia community, partially because that's who's interested in this data, and well, partially because it's a smaller community to start with.
It's interesting that now that level, that those types of entities are now in Wikidata for one country.
Yeah.
It could be a precedent for other countries.
Absolutely. So the info box that we built to display that data on Wikidata on Wikipedia, it could be reused for the other language versions of Wikipedia. Well, depending on their level of enthusiasm for using Wikidata powered info boxes.
Yes, and so to kind of accommodate that flaw, I guess, that many discussions are in Swedish and hard for others to understand, I've tried to include many of the arguments in the report, which is in English, and try to explore them there. Yeah.
Okay, so, but I think the question that you're asking at the end of your talk is, we all agree that we can't have all the scientists dump all their data on Wikidata.
Mm.
But these are sort of official statistics, or these data are what you call very normalized or whatever. Standardized, I'm sorry. And so what we're looking here is like a notability criterion or something for scientific data. And here, in this case, it seems to be that the government is sort of sanctioning the data, so this is how it becomes notable, but there may be other criteria that make scientific data in a certain way. I don't know, maybe you are the first to collect data on a certain thing, and that's what it makes it. There might be other criterions. And so I understand you correctly that right now Wikidata has no threshold of notability for scientific data points yet, but there should be. I mean, I have to disclose I'm the chair of the board of Wikimedia Deutschland, and so I talk about Wikidata strategy a lot. And it has been a big credo of Wikidata. No, not anyone can just come and open a dumpster full of data over Wikidata and then the community has to deal with it somehow. No, every new edition of data will be assessed on a case-by-case basis, and there will be principle and standards and for that. But I see that you've encountered a problem that you have no standard for this type of data yet, and that you wish there to be one. how confident are you that your data should be on Wikidata, and where would you draw the line, Mimi?
Sorry for the long comment.
Yes. So the question is, how confident am I that this data is notable? I feel as comfortable as I can be, just having like 1 year what can I say, experience in this world. But I put a lot of trust in the Wikimedia Sweden community,
Yes.
and
Yes, our point of view is that, well, the Wikidata notability criteria are very open for a reason, and I believe the phrasing is that we must be dealing with clearly identifiable entities that are described in reliable sources. And when it comes to to these coastal water bodies, they are clearly identifiable. Identifiable. Thank you. In that they all have, as you saw, external ID numbers that can be sourced with the IONET database. So they exist as, well, they do exist as administrative units in the same way that, say, a municipality exists as an administrative unit, which is some sort of abstract, artificially created way of dividing stuff up in order to describe it in a better way. So these identifiers are, for us, a very important indication that, yes, these are clearly identifiable entities that exist. And it will be different for something that is more vague or maybe just used by one institution somewhere. But here we are talking about something used on a European scale.
yes. And this data is absolutely at the core of water management. So it is an important data set.
Yes.
Yeah, I have taken part in the process of writing the current edition of Wikidata's inclusion criteria, and I agree with your interpretation.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
So that's the problem is solved. Thank you.
So I think if you move on to things that don't have a fixed geographical location, that's when this becomes
Yes,
gray
that's
area.
when it becomes
But
vague and
because
fuzzy.
This is both government official published, publicly available, and refers to bodies of water that have a definite location on Earth, it passes the criteria.
Yes.
Despite being fluid.
Despite being fluent and despite, not really existing in reality. I mean, it's an abstract way of dividing stuff up, but that's what we humans do.
Yeah. All right, that's our time. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you for your question.
Okay, so on behalf of Lucas, that's the leader for the environmental space, and myself, the co-leader for this space, we are very grateful for your time and your contribution and the discussion. Yeah, so let's enjoy the rest of Wikimedia. Bye.
Awesome. Oh, I love you. You're awesome.